Let's talk about the incident that I guess got everybody talking. In mid 2008, there's a show in Bakersville, California. Bob's hurting pretty good. His neck is hurting. He needs some pain meds. He's put off another elbow surgery, and he asked Ken Anderson if he can borrow some pills. And Ken says, sure, just go in my bag and get them. And he says that's normal. In the locker room, it's an unwritten rule. Everybody helps each other. The office knows it happens, but they turn a blind eye because they know the guys need it sometimes. And allegedly, Ken even says, hey, if you need anything else, just help yourself. So later that day, of course, he did need some more. So he goes back and helps himself from Ken's bag. And he says, Ken comes in with Umaga a few minutes later, and I tell him I'd taken 4 pills and would replace them when I got my next prescription filled. He said that was fine. And then he started giving pills to Umaga. He thought that was the end of it. And a week or so later, this rumor comes up that now Bob Holly has went into Ken's bag without permission. And he confronts Ken about it and calls him at home and says, hey, here's what I heard. Ken says, no, everything's fine. But in the end, he gets a call from Johnny Ace asking what's going on. And he just relays what he'd heard. And he found out afterwards that through talking to John Cena and Shawn Michaels, the rumor had started when Umaga told a couple of people that he'd gone into Ken's bag to get pills. Ken never told Umaga that he had said he could, and then the rumor started spreading. He says Ken could have stopped it by saying, I told Bob it was okay, but he didn't. He'd been lying to me the whole time, claiming he didn't know what was going on and not admitting that he couldn't or he hadn't squashed the rumor. It was just self-preservation for Ken. Word had spread that I'd taken stuff from his bag, and when the rumor reached management, Ken could have gotten in trouble, so he stooged me out. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, everybody heard about it, but I didn't hear it to that detail of Bob. I think that the rumor, or at least the story that I had heard way back when, was something along the lines that Bob had gone in Ken's bag, and it wasn't in all that detail or anything like that. And Bob had said that no, Ken knew I was going in his bag and everything was fine. That's about as much as I really ever heard of it. And that it was all taken care of from that point forward. Once, I guess Johnny had confronted Bob about it, but I was always under the understanding that it had been squashed and that it was a misunderstanding.
Bob Holly and Cody lose the titles at Night of the Champions on June 29th, 2008. And that happens when Cody turns on him. And behind the scenes, a lot of people are sort of freestyling that the belts are coming off him and he's going to be fired because of this whole pill situation. And he says that's all bullshit. And he gets his surgery and he wrote, it bothered me that Cody didn't call to thank me for my help or wish me well after my surgery. I taught that little bastard a lot, so his lack of gratitude bothered me. Man, who knew there was fucking heat with Bob Holly and Cody Rhodes?
Yeah, I really didn't. And it's funny when you go back and read things or listen to things that guys write at certain times in their career and certain times in their life. I would even dare to say that Bob may have a different viewpoint today. But no, I didn't know that. And like I said, especially when it comes to Dusty, having been there with him, I feel like I'm defending Dusty, but man, he was so on pins and needles not to be viewed that way is showing favoritism to his son.
Right.
That he would back out of shit and he wouldn't have an opinion. He wouldn't do shit so that he wouldn't be accused of it.
Right.
That's the weird part to me.
Well, but this could just be sour grapes from Bob, right?
And it could be. Yeah, it definitely could be.
It's unfortunate, that this happens this way. So Bob's out a few months because he's got this elbow surgery, and then he calls creative to sort of discuss new ideas. And on TV, Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase are getting a lot of heat, beating people in sort of chicken shit heel ways. And he's pitching the idea, what if I come in and bring Billy Gunn in and we do a program with Cody and Ted? So it's veterans against upstarts. They said they'd think about it, but then he didn't hear anything back. And then one day Johnny calls and says, we don't have anything lined up for you. So he pitches Johnny the idea, and Johnny says, I like it. I'll go back and talk to creative. And then he gets a call later saying, sorry, Bob, they just don't have anything for you. Quote, Johnny had been one of my main supporters over the years. He told me he'd gone to bat for me in meetings all the time, and so had lots of the other agents. They knew how long I'd been loyal, how hard I'd work, and I was always on time, and I stayed in great shape and did exactly what was asked of me. Yet it all came down to, quote, we don't have anything for you. That was it. I was done. I told Johnny that I deserved more than coming back to sit in the locker room doing absolutely nothing. So if creative had nothing for me, they should just go ahead and send me my release. So in January 2009, 15 years after I'd started with the company, we parted ways. Meltzer wrote in the January 20th 09 Observer, after all these years, WWE axed Bob Holly. He'd been with the company dating back to his debut in 94 as Thurman Sparky Plug, the race car driver, who quickly became Bob Spark Plug Holly. He won the tag titles 3 different times and the hardcore title 6 times, which resulted in his nickname changing to Hardcore Holly. In the last few years, particularly coming off Tough Enough, where he roughed up Matt Capitelli, he was portrayed as this angry, bitter guy that nobody liked. And in fact, he was fired, and most people on the indie scene were calling folks in WWE to get his number. And almost nobody in WWE had any idea what it was because nobody liked him because he had no friends. That's from the Observer. What say you?
Well, I wasn't there when he got fired. I had already left like a month prior to that.
I love you said I'd already left because you had already been fired too.
I had already been fired. I'd already been fired too. So a month before that, they had nothing for me. It's obvious they had absolutely nothing for me.
Isn't it weird? Let's talk about that for a minute. Here's Bob Holly, who's been here for 15 years. And I'm thinking, I mean, I almost said this a minute ago when I went through that note, I was like, fuck man, 15 years. Like they didn't have anybody who'd been with the company that long. I mean, why would they get rid of somebody who'd been there? And I was like, oh, well, fuck, you were there 21. So
22. Yeah.
Well, you took a year hiatus.
Yeah. Well, still we were talking during that time. At least we talked during that time.
So yeah, I mean, you hear that, creative has nothing for you. And he just says, hey, if you don't have anything for me, just go ahead and send me my release. Well, why would you sort of call their bluff?
Well, again, he's a proud guy, and if there's nothing there, then let me move on and let me go on and earn a living somewhere else. As far as nobody having his number, I think, look, Bob, if you take time to get to know Bob, Bob is one of the most personable, nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. And I happen to like Bob a whole hell of a lot. I think he's a great guy and a shitload of fun to be around. I think he got a bad rap. He got off of the Matt Capitelli thing, a television show, a reality TV show, folks. He got a bad reputation, and we capitalized on that. And we, fed that fire to make that reputation be so that people believed in what they saw. Bob could be a grumpy, miserable son of a bitch backstage sometimes, but you know what? If he's at a convention or he's somewhere where I am, I'd try to go out of my way to go find Bob Holly and give him a big hug and say hello, because he's one of my favorite people. Never had a problem, never had an issue with him doing business in any way, shape, or form. And he was just a great guy to be around, my opinion.
When you find out that he's gone, were you surprised to hear?
No, because he had been there 15 years. And I think that there was that point where, what do you do with him right now? And maybe they just didn't have anything for him right now. And when he called their bluff, it's like, okay, here's your release. We'll let you go. I think it was the perfect storm in that regard.
Were you surprised he lasted in the company as long as he did?
No, because he was a hell of a hand and he knew how to get guys over.
What do you think his legacy in the business is going to be?
Being a double tough son of a bitch and knowing how to put people over.
In your opinion, is Bob a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't bitch about Bob Holly being in the Hall of Fame at all.